It is 12:04 in the afternoon. I want to thank everyone for joining today for our fifth session, Telehealth, Social and Cultural Considerations. These events are brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatrics California Chapter 2 through a grant from the American Academy of Pediatrics, the national organization, in collaboration with the San Bernardino County Medical Society and the California Medical Association. We have a fantastic program today. And as a reminder, we structure our meetings with an opening, then a didactic session. After that, we have a presentation, a case presentation, which today is going to be Dr. Albert Arteaga. And then we finalize with Q&A. So I would like to introduce our speaker. We have once again the amazing David Ford, who is the Vice President of Health Information Technology for the CMA. He's extremely knowledgeable with telehealth, and we are very thankful that he comes to us to bring us a fantastic topic today. I already saw his slides, and it has really good information. So please stay tuned, stay focused, and enjoy the presentation. David, take it away.
Thank you, Tomas. I think you were dangerously close to overselling me there, but let me just get my slides up on the screen real quick. So this is actually a topic that is becoming quite a hot topic politically in Sacramento right now. Telehealth, as I'll talk about in a few moments some more, telehealth rolled out very fast last year. After years of kind of slow and measurable growth, it exploded. And I think what we found over the last year, though, is that the rollout of telehealth has been very uneven. And I know for all of you, because I know that you're very concerned and very dedicated to the populations that you serve, a lot of whom are going to be vulnerable and underserved populations, that hopefully this is of particular interest to you. So let's dive right into it. CMA's lawyers get very unhappy with me if I don't start with this slide. So I'm sorry if those of you who have seen my other presentations, you've seen this slide a million times. I apologize. I have to put it up. Basically just, I am not an attorney. Nothing I'm about to give you is legal advice. Doesn't really apply to this presentation anyway, but if you need specific advice, please contact a qualified attorney. I was already briefly introduced. I know a lot of you know me. I am the Vice President of Health Information Technology for the California Medical Association. I rejoined CMA, and I say I rejoined CMA last year because it's actually the third time I've worked for CMA, and in 3 different capacities. But this most recent time, I came back to CMA after 5 years running an organization called CalHIPSO that some of you may be familiar with. CalHIPSO was an organization that was partially founded by CMA and got designated by the federal government as the regional extension center for health IT for most of California, meaning that we did a lot of this, educating and helping physicians understand how to use health information technology in their practices. So to get into the sort of the meat of my presentation, I want to start by taking just a quick step back and thinking, it's interesting just where we're sitting right now time-wise, it being March 18th, 2021. And I think back a year ago today, March 18th, 2020, I went into CMA's office in downtown Sacramento long enough to pick up a laptop that was being checked out to me by CMA, and I went home and set up my home office where I'm presenting to you from today, and that's where I've been working ever since. And so, this whole week, I know everyone's looking at like just sort of that marker of time. It's been a year since the world shut down. And as we look, I don't have to tell any of you, I think you lived through this much more than I did. the world changed overnight. This is a study of one practice that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and just how their case rate changed literally across a weekend. So you look at March 13th, 2020, they were 100% in-person practice. By Monday, they were about 25% in person. And over time, by the first part of the next week, they were about 90% telehealth. So this telehealth, rollout was not only was not only pronounced, but it was fast how quickly it happened. And as I say, you all lived this, so you know more about it than I do. But then, as I mentioned, as the researchers have delved a little more into this rollout has been very uneven.
David, just one comment. You
Yeah.
are breaking up frequently, David. I don't know whether it's a problem with others also or only me.
Are others hearing me break up?
I hear you good. This is Dr. Valencia.
I
Oh,
hear you
that's good.
okay, David. I think it might be on your end, Dr. Rajashekar.
Okay, that's all I wanted to check. Thank you.
Okay. Well, please, yeah, thank you for letting me know. So this was actually in the same study in the New England Journal of Medicine. The University of California, San Francisco internal medicine primary care practice did a look at their patient load for about 10 days before the shutdown happened, and then about 10 days after the shutdown happened last year, to look at how the population who had come through their practice had shifted. And so as you look at all these bars on the left side, you start with people over the age of 65. You see how they dropped as a proportion of patients. Non-English language preference, they dropped. Medicare dropped. Medicaid dropped. African Americans, the Latinx population, API population, all of that dropped. What's the only bar that went up? Non-Hispanic white. Those were folks who were better able to access telehealth, who may have been more comfortable with telehealth. And so while everyone else was dropping away, they were actually rising as a proportion of the patients who came through that practice. So, and as this has been studied across the country over the last year, these numbers bear out over and over and over again. And there's a multitude of reasons why that is, but definitely one of the things that we need to be cognizant of as we talk more about telehealth and how it's used in vulnerable populations, we do have that persistent digital divide. And these numbers are actually from Pew Research. They do survey data every year about use of the internet at home. And as you can see, as you get into upper income families, it's 98%. It's essentially everybody uses the internet at home. As you get down, it drops a little, drops quite a bit, to where individuals under $30,000 a year, still a lot, 82% is up a long way from where they were, but it still lags below their upper income, the upper income cohorts. And there's one nuance here that's really important as we approach this population in telehealth, is that the researchers have done a deeper dive onto this and looked at not just how much they use the internet, but how they use the internet. And it's really important because in that lower income threshold, those individuals very heavily tend to be dependent upon smart devices to access the internet. And so they are using 4G internet on their cell phones or their iPads. So it's not like any of us who probably have a home network and a home Wi-Fi. They're very, very smartphone dependent for internet access. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that matters in a moment. And then I say, you see this everywhere, even in San Francisco, right? San Francisco, the worldwide home of Silicon Valley, the birthplace of the internet. You would think this would be less pronounced. It is not. You see the digital divide, you see in the top line overall, it's about 93% of people are internet users at some level. It drops for the Latino population, drops pretty significantly for non-English speakers, older patients, and then all that big drop down to about 53% for really robust internet users for those earning under $25,000 a year. So even in hyper-wired San Francisco, we see these same trends playing out. So some key takeaways. Yes, most people are using the internet. So the disparities in the digital divide are somewhat less prominent, but they are still there and they are still persistent. The disparities definitely persist in home internet access and speed, smartphone ownership, digital skills, especially among lower income adults and older adults. And they are more pronounced among non-white and low income populations. So, of course, today we're here to talk about telehealth. So what does all of this mean for telehealth? As I'm sure I don't have to tell you, it means that as you approach, rolling out telehealth in your practice, expanding usage of it as a modality, these are all things you need to be aware of. If you've seen some of my other presentations, I am very, very big on pre-visit screening of patients in telehealth. I'm big on patient checklists. And one portion of that you need to be very aware of is screening your patients for their technology needs or their technology, their comfort with the technology that you're using. So, at the time your staff is confirming a patient visit, you want to be asking some of those questions. Do you have a device that can run this telehealth platform? I know there's some really cool telehealth platforms that are smartphone apps. That doesn't help if your patient doesn't have a smartphone. So that's something you want to be very, very aware of. Alternatively, if your telehealth platform is web-based and you're expecting a patient to use a laptop, do they have a web-enabled laptop that can access that the internet and your platform? One thing to be especially aware of, and that your staff, if they're doing this work with your patients, needs to be very, very aware of at the moment, is that even your patients that have a home Wi-Fi network, that network may be very, very taxed at the moment, because all of us usually have multiple things going on at once, right? I'm sure probably the vast majority of your patients right now, because your pediatricians are doing distance learning. Their parents very likely doing remote work. And that's not even before we even get to, Netflix and Disney Plus and streaming and all YouTube and all the entertainment that could be going on. So even your patients that do have access to a home network, that network can be very, very taxed at the moment. And it's something you might want to look at when scheduling patients for telehealth visits that involve video conferencing, is just probing a little bit with your patients. What else will be going on in your house at that time? Can you have 4 people streaming at once? If not, should we look at a different time of day when maybe distance learning might be done for the day? So, it's something you always have to be aware of, but we have to be more aware of it at the moment because we're all so dependent upon our devices. And then the third point on here is back to what I said about vulnerable populations being very smartphone dependent for their internet access. Because I know a lot of physicians especially who do deal with vulnerable populations, are running into problems with cell phone plan related limitations. So a patient says, yes, I can download this app. I can do a telehealth visit at this time, and then they've hit the limit on their data plan, or they've hit their cell phone minutes for the month, or it's a prepaid phone and they didn't pay it up this month. Those things you have to be aware of, because that may very well be how your patient is planning to do their visit, and then it doesn't work. So with all of that in mind, I know there's sort of I know from doing a lot of telehealth visits over the last year, one of you is very likely to ask me about phone visits and say, okay, yes, huge digital divide problems, challenges, cell phone challenges, taxing networks. Why don't we just move everything onto telephone? So for the moment, during the public health emergency, that is a fine way to approach it, actually. The commercial payers, Medi-Cal, everyone is paying telephone visits at parity. But especially for your Medi-Cal patients, you do want to be aware. There's a whole conversation going on in Sacramento right now about the future of telehealth after the pandemic, which I know is the shameless plug. That's the topic of your webinar 2 weeks from now. So I don't want to spoil this, but you do need to be aware. Medi-Cal has proposed to pay phone-only telehealth using a separate fee schedule from video conferencing telehealth, and although it's not stated as such, presumably a lower fee schedule. CMA is not in favor of that proposal. In fact, we are fighting it tooth and nail, but you do need to be aware it is possible that we could lose on that point, and more to come on that. There are in phone visits some specific challenges in the pediatric world, because and I know this really from a lot of pediatricians who have talked to me about this, but in pediatrics, so much of the time you're trying to engage both the patient and the parents at the same time, which you can do in a video visit, but it's much more challenging if they're passing a telephone back and forth to talk to you. And then this third one, this third point in here, I struggled about whether to bring this up. I know this might sound a little off, but one of the things, especially pediatricians, have told me that they like about video conferencing, telehealth visits, is that you get a look into your patient's life that you wouldn't otherwise get. What is their living situation? Is their home clean, orderly? Is their home chaotic? Are there a lot of people living there? It can give you some clues about what's going on in your patient's life that you wouldn't get otherwise. I know that seems a little weird, but I have had so many pediatricians tell me, like, yeah, I had no idea my patient was living with grandma and grandpa. And obviously you don't get that from a phone visit. And really, and I work this in some level into every presentation I give at telehealth, but just when you're dealing with these technology challenges, a little bit of empathy goes a really long way. As I say, during the pandemic, the technology challenges have only gotten worse. We've only gotten more frustrated. We are all spending way too much time on Zoom. Zoom fatigue is a very real thing. And I think especially with kids because of distance learning. And so I just encourage everyone, telephone or video conference, as much as you can, as much as your staff can, just that relentless positivity can just go a long way to helping to ease the challenge. And just that understanding, like, wow, yeah, this is frustrating. Yeah, this technology is not working very well, or wow, we thought this was going to work and it didn't. Well, let's try something else. That connection with your patients can be really, really helpful. I did want to throw out that there are opportunities out there. There are organizations out there that do help if your patients are saying, I don't have these devices. I don't have home internet. There are programs out there to be aware of that can be beneficial, of course, beyond telehealth, but which can be beneficial to your practice. These are some, I will make these slides available after the presentation, but the National Digital Inclusion Alliance does help individuals get free and low cost internet. There's Lifeline phone service. There's a group called PCs for People. And I know that's a lot for a small practice in particular to take on, but these are available. And if you can have some of these resources available and, you can recommend them to patients, it might help them even beyond just being able to access your practice by telehealth. A couple other just specific patient populations I wanted to mention real quick. I get a lot of questions about patients with limited English proficiency. They can often be a challenge for practices, but they can be a particular challenge to engage them through telehealth. I do encourage practices to be aware of how many languages are spoken in your patient population, and as much as possible to have your patient checklist and other information available in those languages. I put a link here on the screen to the COVID-19 Health Literacy Project. They have some really fantastic resources in multiple languages, specifically about telehealth. So if you need a place to go, all that stuff is available for free. I went on there and was able to download some stuff. That's just a really great resource and can make you a resource for your patients on how to interact with patients who have challenges with English. If the patient needs an interpreter, which some of them may, I do know, and I can't list them off the top of my head, but I do know that many of the telehealth platforms have now implemented three-way calling, which allows you to have you, the patient, and an interpreter on. There are also services called VRI, Video Remote Interpretation, which provide an interpreter. And then if it's a family member, which I know many times in pediatrics, it will be a family member who's going to interpret. You just want to make sure, again, when you're confirming the patient, make sure that person is there and that person's going to be available at the time of the visit. A couple specific things about pediatrics and telehealth. The patient checklist that I've referenced many times, for adults, a patient checklist can be pretty straightforward. Make sure you're in a quiet place, make sure your device is charged, make sure you know how to log onto the system, make sure you set up an account, all of those things. For pediatrics, it helps to add a little bit to that patient checklist because you are mostly talking to the parent, not to the child, and helping just the parent talk to the child about telehealth. I think probably, many children are sort of more aware of this at this point because, I think a lot of parents probably say, well, you're going to see your doctor the same way you see your teacher because of distance learning. But helping to give parents some tools just about this is the same as going to the doctor. You're just going to see your doctor in a new way to make sure nobody gets sick. That can be very powerful and help ease some tensions that kids might have about telehealth. This one I hear from a lot of pediatricians, very, very important when you're engaging kids to ask the parents to turn off all other electronics. I have heard so many stories from pediatricians about trying to have a telehealth visit and the parent hands the kid an iPad and says, here, play your game while I talk to your doctor. Not how it works. Or the parents who who put on a cartoon while you're trying to do a telehealth visit. Just getting everyone to understand this is the same as if you came to my office. We want you aware, we want to talk to you, but we definitely want to talk to the child. And again, just Zoom fatigue is very real. We all have it, but I think it's been particularly hard on children. I know I've had to run through this very fast. This presentation I'm doing today is a very abbreviated version of a much longer webinar that CMA put on back in October. If you're wondering why my presentation references San Francisco several times, it's because I actually had an expert from the UC San Francisco Center for Vulnerable Populations who presented on that webinar. And that link, when you get the slide deck, that link will take you to the webinar. You can download the longer version of today's presentation off the CMA website. A couple resources that I thought I would make you aware of. CMA just a month or so ago published our online telehealth resource center. It is available at that link. Basically what we did was, for months, we scoured the web for the absolute best telehealth resources we could find in different categories. And so we just picked the best ones. We published them on the web by category. So we do have a section titled pediatric, and we do have a section on limited English proficiency, where we have some resources that might be helpful going forward. I will make an absolutely shameless plug for Thursday, April 8th, 1 week after the next time I present to you guys, our telehealth town hall. This will be the last in a 12-part series that CMA is doing on telehealth, and very, very little presentation. It is bring your questions, everything you've ever wanted to ask me about telehealth, just open mic session. So I hope you'll have the opportunity to join us. And with that, thank you, and I am happy to take questions.
David, can you please expand a little bit about the telehealth surveys that you are talking about? That is free and low-cost internet. Is it available for general public, those who have difficulties paying for internet service and things like that?
Yeah, let me go back to that slide for just a moment. And let me see if this will actually let me do it. So, yes, and I'll actually, if you can still see my screen, I'll actually just call this up. So this is a group called the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And what they've done actually is put together a whole list of resources. So you'll see like where some of the big internet providers, Comcast, Xfinity, Charter, AT&T, have made available Lifeline internet service. You see here they've listed off what some of the eligibility requirements are. So if you have patients who need internet really for, as I say, for anything, for telehealth, but also for remote work, distance learning, YouTube, whatever it is, this is a place you can send them, where it lists off all these opportunities that are available out there. And as you see, there's internet service, but there's also like PCs for People that makes very low-cost PCs available in the same way. So there's just a bunch of, but anyone can access this. Let's say if they meet the eligibility requirements. So for example, you see here's AT&T's eligibility requirements. Does that answer your question?
I think so. When people say I don't have internet access, I can't afford to pay for the service, things like that. Maybe I can give them this site to go in, sign up. That's how it works.
Yeah, and you'll see mostly this site is connecting people to programs that are being offered by the various companies. So you'll see here, like if they want to Comcast, they can follow this, they can follow here to apply. This charter, I guess, is better because there's a mail-in application form. It's a little weird in Comcast to say get low-cost internet access, apply online, but how I look at it. But as I say, that that link is in when my slide deck link goes around, but there it is in the chat box as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be helpful if it's a mail-in, because if they don't have internet, how are they going to access it online?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless someone can help them, or they can go to a public, like a library that has internet access, those kind of things.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do we have any other questions?
Yes, David, I have a question. This is Dr. Valencia. How would you do? I would have a family with like 3 kids all together that would do telehealth. And then mom usually would kind of, move back and forth between the 3 kids about the complaints and what's going on. So I have trouble figuring out what time frame to assign each patient. Where we document, like from 1 o'clock to 1:10 is patient A, 1:11 to 1:15 is patient B. Because on the DocsMe, it's the total amount of time that would actually come out because mom would only sign in once. So then I'm not sure what is acceptable to assign the amount of time that I spend with each patient, like where it's going to be okay with the medical or any other insurance.
Okay, I will say, so you're talking about how you document it, like for billing purposes?
Yes, for billing purposes.
Okay, so admit up front, that gets a little outside of my scope of practice.
Okay.
I mean, I would, for the moment, and I'd be curious if any of the other physicians could weigh in here on how you might handle a situation like that, but you're talking about, you set up one telehealth call, just so I understand the situation, one telehealth call for half an hour, but you're spending 10 minutes with each of 3 kids.
Yes.
I would say, at least for the moment during the public health emergency, I would probably bill that as 3 separate visits, but I don't know. As I say, if anyone else has knowledge, I don't handle the billing end of this very often, but yeah, somebody help me out here.
Yeah, this is Rajshekhar. I think we need to build 3 separate. The first patient, when the mother is talking, you open the patient's notes, but don't close it. When she starts talking about the second one, open the second one, and the third one later. So separate notes will be open for each of them when the mother is talking about the patients. But don't close the notes, don't finish the notes immediately. Once it is all done, then take your time to finish the notes and then go ahead and bill for each of them separately.
Yeah, I do. Actually, they have their own slots, actually, like 1, 1:10, 1:15. But the problem is mom would only sign in at like 1:10. And I'm not going to let mom sign out and then sign in again for the second patient because I'll be worried that I'm going to lose, lose her.
Oh, so, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah, so mom will basically just continue with the second one and the third one. But then once you actually finish with the visit, what the DocsMe will document is only the amount of time from the time mom signed in up to the time that mom signed out.
Yeah. And your program doesn't allow the mother to sign in for 3 children at the same time. She can't click on the 3 at the same time.
No.
Okay.
So, I mean, I usually would just divide the time between the three of them.
Yeah,
Like if
I think
I
that
use 25 minutes, then I'll just divide, divide by 3 and kind of apportion each one.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David, for the wonderful presentation. The slides, I have actually already shared the slides on the website. You mentioned that you would share them. Is that okay if they are available as you send them to me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Okay, thank you so much. So continuing with our program, we have Dr. Albert Arteaga, who is going to be presenting on a case or presenting the case of the social and cultural implications of telehealth. Dr. Arteaga, I don't know how many of you know him. He is the founder of LaSalle Medical Associates, which has clinics in Fontana, San Bernardino, Rialto, Hesperia, and Victorville. Great enterprise. So Dr. Arteaga, I'm going to leave you the microphone, and if whenever you want, you can just tell me to advance to the next slide.
All right. First of all, let me make sure you can all hear me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Okay, well, I'm glad to talk to you, and I don't have to wear a face mask. That's really nice. Nobody took my temperature. I feel relieved. The only thing is, I don't have a beachfront home like I see one of you has, and I don't have a lakefront home like Dr. Raja had 2 weeks ago. I'm here just with my guardian angel, but that's good. What you're seeing here in the first slide is an image that looks remarkably similar to the caduceus or the medical symbol. And in fact, it is. But it's not, or at least in my case, it's not where I thought it came from. Usually I ascribe this to the Greeks. And this image is from civilization that came before. This would be the Sumerians, which lived in what we call in biblical terms Babylon, or in present terms we say southern Iraq. And they had a god that had the two snakes intertwined with a staff, and that symbolized medicine for them too. So the takeaway from this is we may have ideas, we may think they're original, or at least we may know or think we know where they came from, and maybe they came from somewhere else, and maybe we weren't the first ones to think about it. We tend to recycle things, and that's not bad. I think our knowledge and our experience will make us touch up and improve. So just bear with me. Why am I talking about the Sumerians? It'll make sense in a minute here. But the Sumerians, I found interesting because they had medical care. That was like maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. No, more like 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. And it was quite expensive. I was looking, and if you had an abscess or a boil that needed to be drained and it was done successfully, you would pay the physician with some amount of silver, and I didn't really know what that meant until I saw that for the same amount you could rent a good sized home for 6 months. So that was Medicare rates plus. They didn't have managed care back then, but they sure knew how to charge. And most of the folks didn't have maybe the resources to pay, so they did something else. And this is where it ties in for today. Other folks with less resources, they would take their sick family member and go to the public square or to the marketplace, and they would then lay down the patient, and it would be close to where everybody was passing by, and people that passed by could stop and ask what happened to the patient, and then maybe share some similar experience they had been through, or any piece of information they thought could be helpful. I guess you would call it crowdsourcing. That's crowdsourcing way back then. And I'll leave that for a second. We can go to the next slide. And that's the case presentation. And this Patient is 6 to 10 years old. I'm 6 to 7 years old. First, I want to highlight the doctor for this patient is Dr. Halima Shahabuddin, pediatrician. She's been with me almost 27 years. Don't try to hire her away. And she has, during that time, amassed a remarkable record. No malpractice cases and no grievances. So that carries a lot of weight with me. And when I had this case that she had seen, I thought, well, I want to use it. It's a 6 to 7 year old male patient, Hispanic. You know, we're talking about cultural differences here. I'm going to talk about Hispanics because I am one. So I can pretty much say anything I want, you know, like George Lopez. And you can't tell me I'm prejudiced because I'm talking about my own people. So let's start about, you know, Hispanic. It's right there in the name, Hispanic, always panic. That's the first reaction, okay? So here's this 6 to 7 year old has vomiting and diarrhea for 1 day, and the father called and spoke with Dr. Shahabuddin for approximately 20 minutes. Great. What's wrong with that? Well, Hispanic fathers are very rarely present in the care of their children, with a few honorable exceptions. But, you know, they tend to be a little bit distant. And so when they get involved, they tend to overdo it. You know, they become authoritarian. They want to get cut to the chase. They want you to do something now. They don't want to be inconvenienced, you know, just get it done. Okay. So Dr. Shahabuddin listened and drew up a conclusion of maybe a viral gastroenteritis. This was supported by the fact that there was a sibling with similar symptoms, but there was also a matter of a lower abdominal pain. So she cautioned the father, you know, you better get something done here, like a stat ultrasound. I'll call in the order. Uh-oh, that's an inconvenience. Father said, no, I just want to treat you with, you know, what you're going to tell me to do here at home. So prescription was given, directions, and that was it for that moment, for that first consult. But here's the great point. If we can go to the next slide, I think that will show that Dr. Shah followed up. And I think it's maybe the next slide that will show that she followed up the next day. She called and talked, this time to the mother. And mother said, child is doing better as far as vomiting and diarrhea, but the pain seems to be worse and he's slouching over when he walks around. Dr. Shah said, take him to the ER. They did, and he did have a nappy, and he did go to surgery and convalesced for 2 or 3 days and then went home. Great. Okay, so what are the points to ponder? I don't want to bore you all, and I'm not a good speaker, so, you know, I'm trying to organize things and appeal to you, or at least to your subconscious. I told you the Sumerians, they crowdsourced. Well, they're still around because in the Hispanic culture, it happens the same way. But let me say something first. I can say this because I'm Hispanic, and I don't think there's another group that when presented with illness, sinks to the level of no insight and inability to make decisions and in dire need of direction. Okay, got it? And then what does the doctor do? Well, it could be this and it could be that. Do this or do that, and then call me if anything goes wrong. I said they need direction, and you're giving a bunch of options. There is no leadership there. Give them direction. Don't say, call me if. Don't say it could be this, that, or the other thing, and I can't do something because I don't know this much more about your child. Dr. Shah kind of winged it there and gave something for pain, and that's a no-no if you think appendicitis is looming. But she winged it well, and she followed up. And the nice thing was the father was opinionated, oppositional, but he wasn't there in the second call. So Dr. Shah was able to take the leadership role back with mom and get the kid to the ER where he needed to be. Okay, so Dr. Shah rolled with the punch. She knew she had to be the leader. She couldn't do it in the first instance. She came back and did it in the second instance. I love it. That's a beautiful example of showing leadership when somebody sorely needs it. I think even I need it when I'm sick. I want leadership. I don't want people to tell me, you could do this, that, or the other thing. I don't really care. It's up to you. Choose, choose, choose. I'm not in a condition to do that. This is not a case presentation conference. I'm sick. Tell me what to do. All right. Well, you can, and the younger doctors tend to do this a lot. You can stick to the protocol and say, I can't prescribe anything because I haven't seen him, because I don't have lab work, because they didn't do the ultrasound, whatever. And you can stay that way, very opinionated. But they will crowdsource. If you didn't fill the leadership role, they will fill it with someone else. They're going to go to the comadre, they're going to go to the neighbor, they're going to go to the relatives, they're going to even consult the bank teller. And you gave it up. And guess what? If something goes wrong, you're liable on top of that. So I would say, do what Dr. Shahabudin did. Show leadership and some empathy. Now, if you don't want to show empathy and you want to stick to the protocol and be very opinionated and not give in, I would recommend you give up pediatrics and you apply to the MI5 organization. That's the British counterterrorism branch, and they will take you in a heartbeat. You will fit in right away. MI6, by the way, is where 007 worked, but I don't know if that really exists anymore. But MI5 needs opinionated, protocol-driven, non-empathetic people. Pediatrics needs leadership and compassion or empathy. And you don't say, call me if. You say, I am going to call you back. And you do. And you do. Now, you're going to say, well, you know, that doesn't really happen a whole lot. Well, I'm going to share with you that from my view, from where I am, I see things you don't see. And you can go to the next slide now, please. I see things you don't see. I have a provider in LaSalle Medical Associates IPA that routinely divorces patients, pediatric patients, at the rate of 2 or 3 a week. And I know because I'm signing them. And the reasons are always the same. Lack of compliance, didn't come back for follow-up, shows up late for appointments, misses appointments, or misbehaves in the office. Well, that's all of them. You're not going to have any patients left. Not even your own kids are going to be able to come. So, okay, you're not going to believe this, but 2 weeks ago, this person that routinely divorces 3 patients a week sent me 46 divorces. Now, the reasons were all the same that I just listed, okay? But why are the patients doing this? Because you're not showing leadership. You're expecting them to do something and you're not giving them the direction. You're not holding them to it. Well, they're going to do whatever they want. And remember, the Sumerians are out there. They're going to crowdsource and take your leadership role. You need to take it. Now, I always come up against the same objections. And probably some of you are going to voice it, so I'll say it for you. I always hear this, oh, Dr. Arteaga, it's not just Hispanics, everybody's that way. Well, if everybody's that way, that includes Hispanics, and I'm still right. Okay? So, maybe we need to stop on that comment just for an extra second. If everybody's that way, then maybe the things that I'm highlighting will harken back to, in your memory, to similar circumstances in your culture or everybody else's. So in the end, when we study these matters, and today it's telemedicine with empathy and, you know, cultural bias, in the end, differences tend to blur. We start to find more similarities than we thought were there. And I would like to just make a plea for empathy and leadership. If not, the British Intelligence Service is waiting for you. And the extra mile, whatever model you want to call it, put your leadership to work. You were given the tools and then you abdicate the leadership. How sad. Remember, the Sumerians are still out there and they're going to come to a clinic near you one of these days. I hope you're ready and you have your leadership tools in hand, ready to see them. Thank you. Appreciate your attention. I think everybody was very attentive. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Nice presentation, Dr. Arteaga.
That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Very inspirational. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Arteaga? Comments?
So, Dr. Arteaga, for the patients that from your office when you do telehealth, if the child needs to be followed up, you always make a note of the child's name and call them back in a couple of days. So is that right, what you're doing? Not
Right.
expect them to call you to see if it is not if child is not getting better?
Right. My view is that we should call back. And if you don't have the time, because I know you're busy, I'm not saying you're not doing anything, then, and I have a lot of respect for you, Dr. Raja, don't ever misinterpret me.
No, not at all.
I would say have your most trusted employee call in your name, and then she can relay the message back to you. And if necessary, you can have her, give some update to the parents if based on what she's telling you, you want to, change something. But you, the practitioner, need to retain the leadership and the in-charge role. And if I see it in my culture where it's a dire need when they're in the middle of a illness, and I'm saying it, I hope it resonates with you, because it's worked for me and it's worked for Dr. Shah. Look at this, 27 years and no grievances. Patients love her, and I'm proud to have her in the group, like all the others that I have in the group. But today I only had a few minutes to talk about this one.
That's a good point. Yeah, we do the same thing basically for children that we are concerned about. We do make follow-up calls. Although we tell them call back, we still call them. If they don't, even whether they call or not, we still make a note of it and call them back. Mm-hmm. Even recently also, I had a couple of patients, a teenager who had some urinary symptoms, and his GC was positive, gonococcal was positive. And he basically refused to come, not refused, but we gave him an appointment to come back, and he didn't show up. 2-3 appointments, they didn't show up. We persisted, and finally we got them in. And that did not happen from the patient's side. And the other day, there was a teenager who came in with a swelling on the forearm. Turned out to be, send them to Loma Linda. And we made a prompt follow-up call to find out what happened, because I was concerned about the child, and it turned out to be cancer.
No.
So when we are concerned about things, I think like what you rightly mentioned, we need to take the lead and make the phone calls, not expect the patient to call us. That's a good point. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating today. We are on the hour already. It is 1:01. Before we end today, I am sharing my screen of the website where we have all the resources from telehealth. So it's aapca2.org/telehealth. There you will find all of the videos and all of the presentations. You can play the videos directly on the webpage, and you can access the PowerPoint slides for every single presentation. So with that, I want to thank David Ford for presenting today and Dr. Albert Arteaga for presenting the case. Thank you so much, and we will see you on April 1st for our final webinar. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.